Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am Nick, joined by our good friend Matt Law for a Matt Law special. How are we doing, Matt?
Good. It's been a while.
I know.
Been a real while. I can't even remember the last time, and yet here we are on Valentine's Day together again. Feels like it's meant to be.
Well, like you could escape me, please. This is a special, of course, because Brandon is still on a work trip, but we have a lot to talk about. We were, putting the script together last night, and what might be considered a quiet week is not all that quiet. We're, of course, going to talk about Conor Gallagher.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Matt's special interview with Antonio Conte and much, much more. So let's dive into it. You guys know all these superlatives, the calls to action, Apple Podcasts, Spotify reviews, subscribe YouTube, subscribe to the Dispatch, and of course, join the Discord if you can. It'd be super helpful. Stay tuned for the City preview on Friday with Dan and Sam, I should say. And then, of course, the Blue Royalty City review, because they play on Friday, hopefully this weekend. So lots going on, Matt. But first and foremost, we got to talk about Conor Gallagher here, because it seems to be kind of the headline across the Chelsea sphere this week. He, of course, scored 2 goals on Monday. Is kind of rounding into form. Now has 3 goals, 6 assists on the season. So kind of getting closer to 10 goal contributions, maybe even 15 by the end of the year, which by all means would be good, considering production last year from midfield was very little. You wrote that Tottenham intend to make a summer move for Gallagher if Chelsea do not extend his contract beforehand.
Yeah.
I believe he has a year and a half left, right, on the deal.
Yes, that's right. It'll be a year. It'll be a year at the end of the season, basically.
Yep. So, yeah, what's going on here, man?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fascinating because it seems that it's a situation that just will not go away. I think the club hopes that when the January transfer market ended, talk around Conor would end, but that was never really going to happen. And I think it's the first time he's ever for Chelsea scored back-to-back games. So that's a good thing for him. And then Pochettino came out and called him priceless in the press conference after the Palace game, which again just sort of fed into the feel that Pochettino's got one view and it doesn't necessarily correlate completely with what's happening in terms of Conor's future and his contract at the moment. Now, where we are, Tottenham didn't make any bid in the end in January. They thought about it long and hard. They'd made a very late move last summer, and it was too late. They were quoted a big fee over 50 million, and it was so late that they came in that it was impossible to start negotiating at that level. They decided not to do anything in January and to see where it left them come the summer. Now, I'm told very, very, from a very trustworthy source, that they will 100% make a bid if that contract is not signed. Now, the problem Chelsea now have on that contract is you've basically got 2 graphs and they're tracking in opposite directions with Conor's form. Now, the form that Conor's showing is great for Chelsea, don't get me wrong, but you've got his transfer value that is kind of tracking downwards because of the contract, it has to. And yet, because of his performances and the level he's playing at and the amount he's playing, his wages are tracking what he would get in wages from most clubs is tracking on an upward curve. Now, in terms of Chelsea getting the situation sorted, as one source said to me, that is a bit of a nightmare for them because they're both tracking in the wrong direction for them. We know that Chelsea have a wages policy where they don't really want to pay many players, if any players, over sort of 100, 150 grand a week. And yet they also have a valuation of Conor, which is far higher than the reality because of his contract. They are aware that in a normal situation, Conor would be worth 60, 70 million. People may say that's high, but I think that's realistic in this transfer market when you look at other people's prices. And yet, with a year left on somebody's contract and no progress being made whatsoever, the reality of the fact is that to rival clubs, his value is probably about 30 to 35 million, which makes for a very, very difficult scenario. There have been some talks around his contract, but nothing very detailed, I'm told, and certainly no significant progress. No concrete offer has been made to him yet, because I don't think Chelsea want to get into a situation whereby they just make offer after offer and try to come to an agreement like that. But I do think an offer will be made before the end of the season, but it feels like they're a long way off being in a situation where you'd be confident of an agreement.
A lot going on here, right? And it's a mess completely of Chelsea's making. This is undoubtedly one of the sillier things that Chelsea have done over the last few years. Because at this point, let's pretend the reason I bring up his goals and assists and I think overall contributions this year is we've talked before about England international gets regularly called up, right? If he gets to 15 goal contributions this year, being one of the few healthy players that lasts the entire season, the manager loves him, the fans love him, and he exits the year as one of your, let's just call it, top 3, top 4 most productive players on the season. That's a £200,000 a week player. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I mean, all I would say to that is I agree. I don't see a club out there who can pay him £200,000 a week who's going to be interested in him. So that's in Chelsea's favour. I cover Tottenham closely, and they certainly don't pay £200,000 a week. So he's not going to join Tottenham for £200,000 a week. But I agree with you. If you just literally write down all the list of things he's achieved and where he is, and put it on a graph against what players can earn, you are dead right. I mean, the mad thing is about Connor is that Chelsea didn't actively try and sell him in January. They did try and actively sell him the summer before, and they did try and actively sell him January 2023. So it's been 3 transfer windows now. The club have kind of been either actively selling him or open to getting rid of him. And that obviously causes its own problem. Connor is incredibly loyal to Chelsea and wants to play for Chelsea, but it does cause a problem with then going into contract negotiations with him, because there will inevitably be a fear on Connor's side that if he does get a contract offer now, the contract offer is only really there to actually protect his value and not because they have a great faith in him. The manager may have a great faith in him, but the club for over a year now, going back to January 2023, have basically signalled that they don't have a faith in him to be as good as they want to be. Where I think Chelsea have got slightly caught out over this is and this is my theory, this is not from a conversation, I want to make that clear, this is my theory. My theory on this, having thought about it a lot, is that I suspect at the start of the season, when Connor started the season well, they didn't offer him a contract then because they probably thought his form was outweighing the reality of his talent. I think they thought he was probably playing above himself. What he's then proved over now, however months of the season we've played, is that the form has pretty much remained. Okay, everyone has bad games, everyone has little dips, but pretty much the form has continued. And now it's not, I think it's now harder to argue that it's just a form thing, but that puts their back up against the wall because they didn't make a contract offer early on. And if you just look at how differently Chelsea have treated the Connor situation to how they treated Levi Colwill, who they offered a contract to very, very quickly after his good form at Brighton, to Reece James, who they came in and they made an exception for Reece James, quite rightly, by the way. I thought what they did, I know he's got his injury issues, but I was really impressed with the way they moved quickly on Reece after they took over. And they made an exception for him. They paid him more than what really the going rate is at Chelsea these days. They haven't really acted in the same way on Connor, and it says everything that needs to be said in terms of where the club saw him. Now, whether he is changing their minds at all, whether Pochettino's changing their minds by the faith he puts in him. I mean, in the piece I wrote that went out yesterday in England, that he's first for the amount of games he started in the Premier League. He's first for the minutes played. And he's first for all kinds of things like winning possession in the final third, tackles made. He ranks so highly with it. No wonder Pochettino thinks he's priceless, because he literally is this. Yeah. You couldn't physically develop a midfielder who fits into what Pochettino wants from a midfielder any more than Connor. And that was always going to be the case when Pochettino got the job. I mean, I think I must have said somewhere that, the two players I really thought Pochettino would like, one would be Mason Mount. Well, obviously he left, and another would be Gallagher. And they are stereotypical Pochettino players.
So I guess, where does this leave us, right? I mean, we had a couple of questions come in from Chaldea asking if there's a deadline date on Connor's contract situation, and then EOC asking because this is all tied to this like pure profit sell the academy talent model. Given that Chelsea apparently keep briefing that all is well from an FFP perspective, but more or less everyone outside the club disagrees. Is it going to be embarrassing if the club is wrong? And so, like, those two questions, kind of different angles of the same thing here, Matt. But where does this go now?
So, right, I'm going to talk about that from the two sides. From Connor's side, he doesn't have to do anything.
Yep.
Connor's shown that he's loyal to Chelsea. Connor's shown that he's dedicated to Chelsea. He's played with this uncertainty over his future now for over a year. I don't think anyone can question his attitude or anything like that. So this would only be a problem for Connor if he weren't playing. If the club were kind of saying to him, we don't really want to offer you a contract. We'd rather sell you. And in the meantime, you're not going to really play. That's the only problem Connor would have. Now, Connor's made sure through his own performances and also obviously the injury to Lavia, who has barely played a minute, that's ensured that that's just not an issue. So Connor just doesn't have to do anything. Connor would just happily keep playing for Chelsea and giving his all. So it's all on the club and what the club want to do. Now, it's fairly clear that the club can't take it into its final year. So my prediction on this is that the club will make him a contract offer. I think that will happen come the end of the season or before the end of the season. But I struggle to see how they will make him a contract offer and convince him that the contract offer is anything other than protecting his value and a proper commitment to him for him to rush into signing it, which leaves the club with their backs against the wall and also leaves the club really having to consider any offer they get come the summer. And like I say, Tottenham are going to come. Now, on FFP, it's interesting because, as you say, the club will consistently tell us they don't have a big problem with FFP, and we have to take them at their word for that. Other people say differently. What we do know is there is the June 30th deadline on the FFP accounts for this year that they will next get judged against. And if you look back at last summer, it was very clear when you look back at the dates players were sold at and when Chelsea spent money, is that they tried to do their big sales before June the 30th, and they tried to not spend money until after June the 30th. So again, my prediction would be is that before June the 30th, this comes to a head one way or the other, and Connor is either sold or they somehow agree a contract with him. I don't see how Chelsea can let it run past June the 30th. But that isn't a deadline they've told me. That is just me looking at all the facts that are in front of me with a little bit of knowledge of behind the scenes. And that would seem the deadline to me, albeit they could sell him after June 30th, but that would not help their FFP situation for the next time. It's now called profit and sustainability rules. The next time that the Premier League make their judgments over the accounting.
Yeah, I thought the acronym PNS probably not the greatest for audio there. Yeah, I think my final thought on the Connor situation is hopefully there's a lesson learned here. Stop briefing against one of your more popular, better performing players and leave yourself very little wiggle room to do anything else. There you go. How about that? So look, we're going to go into an ad break here. Thank you to sponsors for supporting the show. And we'll be back to talk about vibes. We're going to be back to talk about little Bob Marley. Matt has some thoughts on that. We're going to talk about Pochettino and much, much more. So thanks to sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, Matt, let's talk vibes for a second. Monday was a incredibly weird situation in the fact that Chelsea played one of their worst halves of football of the whole season, followed by a pretty decent second half. And due to a refereeing comms error, we may have an anthem for this team. Of course, Three Little Birds by Bob Marley was sung by both fan bases. Kind of a really cool moment, actually, right after the half. And you kind of saw at the end, Chelsea fans had adopted this by the end of the game as something to maybe soothe their own worries with. But talk about that. Talk about the moment.
Some people have pointed out to me that Chelsea fans have sung it in the past, so I don't remember. Mm-hmm. It might be my memory. It might be that I just didn't take a lot of notice because it was just sung at a time where I wasn't really taking an awful lot of notice. So apologies that I wasn't aware of that. But you're right. I mean, the two really interesting things about that whole scenario at the start of the second half was that it was about a 10-minute delay. It took ages. It was really frustrating. And the Palace DJ ended up putting on Three Little Birds, which was a great moment. You know, fair play, hats off to whoever it was. And both sets of fans started singing it. And it was funny. Now, two things of this. I was sat there thinking this delay really messes up Chelsea because I thought Pochettino is going to have got into them at half-time. They want to come out and start fast. They want to get the game going. And I was thinking, if I was Pochettino now, I would be fuming because I'd be thinking this is going to take all of our momentum out of the start of the second half. In actual fact, Chelsea did brilliantly they scored within 90 seconds and they came out the blocks flying. So fair play to them for that. I thought that was interesting. And then as soon as Chelsea equalised, the Palace fans stopped singing Three Little Birds and we didn't hear it from the Palace fans again. And Chelsea sang it pretty much non-stop. And I thought the away fans were brilliant again. I mean, Chelsea's away fans are fantastic. It's a lot like a lot of clubs where the home atmosphere sometimes not great, but the away fans fantastic. And Chelsea's away fans fantastic. And they kept singing it, and they obviously they put Chelsea into the song, and it became a real soundtrack. And Conor Gallagher afterwards said that he was like sort of singing it in his own head as he was playing.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, everything's going to be all right. Is quite a nice little lyric to sum up where we are with Chelsea. Don't worry, every little thing's going to be all right. And I will bet an awful lot of money with you now if you want to take the bet in pounds, dollars, whatever you want, that this Three Little Birds we hear at the next Chelsea home game and probably at every Chelsea home game from now until the end of the season. And I'm not just talking about the fans singing it. I'm talking about the DJ at Stamford Bridge playing it, because they will have missed an absolute sitter if they do not play that in the pre-match music. And do you know what? Silly things like this can help. It really can help.
Totally.
It could, yeah. I mean, because as I just said, there's a contrast between the atmosphere at Stamford Bridge and away from home. If they start playing this at home and it lifts the atmosphere a little bit at home, it will start to help the home atmosphere, which will be good. And also just the feel around it. It lightens everything. The players clearly like it.
Yeah.
It can become a thing. It can become a thing of the season. And I can see myself writing a piece come the end of the season, if things have improved a little, whereby this song plays a prevalent part in the piece. As stupid as that sounds.
No, doesn't sound stupid at all. I think we all, anyone with ears and eyes took note of that. I mean, it's obviously been an up and down season, and you can't think of a better song to soothe some of the worries, and young team. Maybe what we learned on Monday is that they respond really well to positive reinforcement. Maybe that's the way to get them going. I mean,
also it felt one of those kind of movie scripts as well, because the way the lyrics are with everything's going to be all right. A draw, let's face it, a draw would have been a terrible result against Palace with their three best players out. And so to score twice in stoppage time with those lyrics ringing out that everything's going to be all right, everything sort of was all right just about in the end, It just felt like it all came together into a bit of a script. Certainly a better movie script than Argyle, judging by the reviews.
Yeah, well, just a bit. Look, last thing on this, because I think you're right. Stuff like this can change the vibe around the club. It can change the vibe around the fan base. Your bet is no good with me because I've already asked Lee Parker to inform the stadium crew to get that going. But look, I don't know. So it felt right. It felt good for once. The season hasn't always felt that way. And anytime you get something going in the opposite direction, you kind of want to latch onto it and see what goes on.
Exactly.
One thing about the performance in particular is Poch, right? Cole Palmer comes out and says, the manager helps us every day, little conversations telling us what to do. He supports us massively. Credit goes to him for keeping us together. He's been amazing with me from the first day. He put his arm around me, gave me the freedom and confidence to go out there and play. At halftime, he's telling us all the good tactics, but it's down to us to show some intensity, play forward, and be brave. He, for I think some rightful stick that Poch has gotten over the course of the month, the way he set up the team and tactics and personnel and all that sort of stuff. Monday, I think is a lot more on the players to just go beat a inferior team, and I think Cole kind of sums it up pretty well there, right? To just say like, hey, he can give us all the notes in the world. We have to be the ones to go execute the plan. And the first half, they just didn't, and they completely turned it around in the second half.
What I think as well, you have to take from the past week with the two victories against Villa and Palace, given what was happening previously after the couple of defeats, is that I think it was a time to really see where the players were with Poch. And they can say whatever they like. They can smile for the cameras when the camera crews go down to Cobham. They can joke and laugh when they know they're on film. We know all that.
Yeah.
We were only going to know what the players really felt about Pochettino through performances and results. And that last week, I think, told us that they're still very much playing for him and have faith in him. The performance against Aston Villa was superb. And then the first half performance was awful against Palace. I agree with you. But then to actually sort themselves out in the second half, I think it showed the same thing. So I just think it was a big week for seeing and having proper proof rather than proof that you might think is just for PR, that the players are fully playing for Poch still and want it to work with him and have belief in what he wants them to do.
Yeah. I guess my next question to you, Matt, is do you think the team is beginning to coalesce a little bit here? Cole goes on to say, everyone will talk if you're not doing well. We just need to try and block it out and focus on ourselves. I think you've seen in the last games that we're trying to stick together. Did you see anything on Monday, goal celebrations, kind of lap around the stadium after going over to the away fans, obviously, that would give you a vibe that maybe they are getting over the hump a little bit?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm reluctant to go too far on this because I've thought this a couple of times this season already. I thought it in after the 4-4 draw, funnily enough, against Man City at Stamford Bridge ahead of the return match this weekend. And I thought we were seeing that then, and then they've slipped back after that. I think they lost 4-1 at Newcastle after that. And so I'm reluctant to go too heavy, but I have seen signs, certainly, that there's a bit of a us against the world mentality in there. They've not liked some of the criticism. They've not liked some of the stories. We've seen with Enzo countlessly now with him and his agent, referring to the fact that someone put out a story that he wasn't happy. And, he scored twice in the last 2 games, played sensationally against Villa. I do think there is a bit of a them and us, which might have fostered a bit more spirit within the group because they've not liked some of the things that have said and they've not agreed with some of the stories. And yes, Cole Palmer hinted at that. And I think certainly Enzo's behaviour with him and his agent has hinted at that. We saw Axel Disasi crowd surfing in the Crystal Palace stand. I don't think I've ever seen a player crowd surf before, so that was fun. Nicholas Jackson running the length of the pitch and getting his 9th booking of the season to go and celebrate with him. We can have different opinions on that, I suspect.
Yep.
But there are some signs. There are some signs of a spirit and a strength. But I want to see more of it before I declare them over a hump with it.
Well, let's talk about the discipline record here. Obviously, this is a bugaboo for me because the best kind of ability is availability. And we have players who have not been available this year due to silliness more than hard tackles or bad challenges or any of the like. So there's a report that came out now that says because of the increased focus on dissent by referees in the Premier League this year, that it has dramatically increased the amount of cards. So things like kicking the ball away, yelling at the referees too much, all this sort of stuff. Chelsea have the highest yellow card for dissent ratio in the league, now 15 on the season. Fulham follows with 14. Manchester United follows with 13. Pochettino, Arteta, Guardiola, and Silva have all also received yellow cards for dissent. And we're going to scrap the blue card conversation for a whole other separate podcast in the future.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that because, look, do I love team camaraderie? Yes. Do I love when the players are given at large? Of course I do. The Jackson one bothered me. Dan and I disagreed on this pretty significantly on Tuesday's show. The Jackson one bothered me because now he's on 9. His 10th one is going to be a 2-game suspension, assuming that he gets it within the next 8 games, which seems rather likely. So then he misses 2 of the next however many games, right? I'm all for it, but you have to be smarter. And he has shown on 9 yellow cards in the league this season that we're not learning very quickly.
Yeah, I'm with you, Nick. I would have stood with you in that debate because I think it's 9 yellow cards, one of which has been for a tackle, which is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's utterly
bad.
ridiculous. Remember, I've interviewed Nicholas Jackson. I've sat with him for 2 hours, and I actually really like him. I don't think he's quite like the persona he puts on the pitch. He's far more likable off the pitch, I would say, and I'm drawn to like him. But it is stupidity of the highest order, and I was willing to give him a pass on it to start with because he came over. The rules had changed a bit. Lots of players were picking up silly bookings.
Yeah.
He, I felt, was trying to prove something to the Chelsea fans as well. I gave him a bit of a free pass when he picked up those very quick sort of 5 bookings and got suspended. And Pochettino said that he'd had him in and talked to him. I think I did it in my interview. He'd made him run around the training pitch millions of times and nearly killed him as a bit of a punishment. But when's he going to learn? You're right. The best ability is availability. And as much as I can laugh, and I do laugh, and I do find it enjoyable as a media person that Nicholas Jackson runs the length of the pitch, literally barges into the referee on his way to go and celebrate with the fans. I find that funny, and it helps me because from a media perspective, it gives me things to write about. But there is no debate that it is completely and utterly stupid. And if he gets his 10th booking, and I'm with you, it feels like an inevitability given the way the season's gone for him. To be booked for 10 bookings as a striker, and as I say, the most it could possibly be is for 2 tackles, is just unbelievable. I mean, the club should really heavily get on top of it with a fine or do something quite drastic on it because it has to stop. And the other thing about, like you say, the group discipline, I mean, it does speak to the age and the sort of mentality of the squad that they are. You could call it naive, you could call it rank stupidity, you could call it whatever, but they should be learning. They should be learning and getting better. Other teams are learning. I think you saw, as I say, I think in the first few months of the season, you saw every team picking up stupid bookings all the time because the way the rules have changed. But I actually think you can see with a lot of teams that's calmed down now, and it needs to stop and calm down at Chelsea too. And they need to get on top of that. The discipline's a big issue. We all, again, like you like to see your players giving it large. If a player gets set upon by a load of opposition players, which I think happened at Manchester United last season when Frank was an interim. Was it Frank an interim charge or someone else in charge?
Yeah.
And nobody went to help them. Well, I'm all for the players going to help the players. And if you pick up bookings, you pick up bookings. That's being a team. That's being in there. That's fighting. That's being a team. Getting these bookings for talking back at the ref, kicking the ball a few yards, petulancy, that's not being a team. That's not giving it large. That's just stupidity. So the two things are different. So I've got to say, Nick, had I been in that argument, I'd have been standing with you against Dan on that. I don't really see how you can argue in favour of him, to be honest with you.
Dan's argument was pure vibes, Matt. So we'll let the people decide what they think. But we're gonna take our final ad break. We have a lot to cover: injuries, Matt's interview with Antonio Conte, and Chelsea's upcoming fixture list. So we will be right back. All right, Matt, going on a bit of a lightning round here, but Chelsea are still very, 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 very injured, and we have some questions from our community saying injury update on some of the long-term absentees like Lavia and Fofana. Trev on the bench, does this mean he is closer to staying or might be sold, or is this just he's a healthy body in a sea of unhealthy bodies? Alex saying, please provide an update on the revamp of the Chelsea medical staff, all this sort of stuff. So where do you want to start on injuries?
Trevor being on the bench, I don't think it changes his future at all, to be honest with you. I think he is a healthy body. I think there are now a lot of central defenders out, aren't there? You know, we're going to hear on Friday how bad Thiago is. Badiashile's out for about a month. I'd still be surprised if we see Fofana this season. I've got to be honest with you. I don't envisage a scenario where we see Fofana this season.
Feels like a big risk. I mean, coming off an ACL.
And they've got a lot of central defenders. If we do, I think it'll be just a little bit right towards the end of the season. So I think the centre-back situation is probably meaning that Chalobah being fit means he is around the squad a little bit more. I don't think it changes the situation, as I said. Lavia is a mystery. Nobody can give you a straight answer on Lavia. I don't know what's happening on Lavia, where he is. You come up against a blank wall when you ask questions against him. So I don't know is the honest answer. There is a revamp. I have to be careful what I say on the medical side in terms of a revamp, because I know a little bit of stuff I'm not sure I'm meant to know, certainly not meant to say it in public. There is a revamp. There is someone in the building who's in charge of the revamp, who is extremely experienced, got an extremely good CV. He's not been made public. I can't make him public, but I know there is a revamp behind the scenes. This revamp, let's face it, needs to work and needs to be the last revamp, because we've had a lot of medical revamps over recent months. And that's probably as good as I can do you on the injuries, I think, unless I've forgotten one.
Yeah. What about Cucurella, who went, I think under the knife
surgery?
Early December, and was kind of rumored to be out for a couple of months. Have we heard anything about him?
No, I'd have to make a check, and I just haven't made a check, I'll be honest with you. So I will endeavour to do that. Put that on our WhatsApp group, and I will endeavour to do that for the next time we speak.
There we go. Hopefully Malo Gusto, just a precaution coming off.
Yeah, I think Malo's fine. He's been playing well recently as well, actually.
He was my man of the match.
Encouraging. Yeah.
Sanchez.
I think he's close now. That will become a really interesting. That's on my list of things to ask Poch soon, because he's close now, and then we have a situation of: do you have a number one? Is Sanchez number one? Has Petrovic made himself number one? Are you going to have two number ones? It's going to be a really interesting situation. That
Ugochukwu, is he long term?
Oh God! I'll be honest with you. I'd forgotten about him.
Okay. Let me just type that in right now. Forgot about him. Okay.
I wish the club were this honest with their medical roundups. They should have it on that list where, instead of just writing next to everyone under rehabilitation or whatever, just be honest. Forgot about him.
Too many players. We have too many players. We can't keep track of them all. Do you think we see Reece by the end of the season, or is he just fully out until?
Yes, I do. No, I think we'll. I've got to make some checks on Reece. Not quite yet, because he's not in the time frame of when he might be thinking of trying to get back into some training. But I certainly think Reece is aiming to play again this season. Yeah, Reece. I mean, I did an interview with Reece's surgeon, and Reece's surgeon said to me on the record that Reece will be fine for the Euros. Now, to be fine for the Euros, you've got to have at least played 2 months of football beforehand. So I'm thinking Reece should be, unless there's a setback, Reece should be aiming to play April, May time at least.
And that's a month and a half away. That's crazy. Okay. Let's look at your interview with Antonio Conte, because you had texted me as we were putting all this together. Just interviewed Conte, just came out. Obviously, one of the quotes that you sent over is, "My history says that I've always arrived at clubs in a difficult situation with problems. I always build. After my first season with Chelsea, we won the title and we could have become dominant in England. We spoke to Lukaku and Van Dijk, and with those two important players, we could have changed the entire situation." Both of those have been well documented as to Chelsea's pursuit and kind of missing out in those moments for different players and for different reasons. But talk about that quote, because it feels like a little bit of nostalgia play there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was fortunate enough to go into Conte's home in Turin, and it's decorated with an awful lot of Chelsea memorabilia, I must say. I mean, if you look closely in some of the pictures on our website and on my Twitter page, you might even be able to spot some yourselves. But there's a lot of Chelsea memories in there. It's a club that will always remain fond to him. And I pretty much said to him, and we talked about this on and off the record, and we talked for longer off the record, as you normally do with people. Yeah. There were other stuff that was on the record. And basically, I said to him, is your one big regret with Chelsea is that, do you feel you had the opportunity to create a legacy there? Did you feel at one stage that you could have created something really special? Because that first season was really special. And he absolutely thinks that. He absolutely thinks that. Now, whether you disagree with him, it's not really the issue. But he felt that Chelsea had a unique opportunity before City had got their house in order with Guardiola properly to really, really take English football on and grab it. And he felt he could do that. And that is why that second season became such a battle between him and the club, because he was just so angry and frustrated that he felt he was denied that opportunity to just really take English football. And I've got to be honest, I remember after when Chelsea won the league with Conte, after that West Brom game, I obviously had to write millions of articles about the season and what happens next. And I think lots of people, myself included, we wrote that, Chelsea should go on and win a lot of trophies with this squad and what they can do now. Seemingly at the time they had the perfect manager. They had incredible players. They should have been first in the queue for the best players. It should have been a moment to really, really push on. And in actual fact, they did let it slip in hindsight. And they did let a big opportunity slip, because along came Guardiola and City and took that opportunity massively.
He's a part of that, though, right? I mean, I think we have to look back on that situation as, yeah, of course, I think there's a fair enough point made that perhaps the business side of the equation didn't necessarily meet his expectations, but he was also the one on a week-to-week basis that was not happy, was making it known that he wasn't happy, and who at the end of that second season just seemed like he was destined to go.
Yeah, well, like I say, I mean, what happened during the summer and how he felt then became the theme for the season, basically. That battle and that difference of opinion between him and the club. But if you remember, I think it was in the October, Michael Emenalo also left. Now, Michael Emenalo also lost heart with the project at Chelsea, because I think Michael Emenalo kind of agreed with Conte that Chelsea were just giving up their chance. They weren't backing their manager, and they were giving up their chance to actually push forward, because I know Michael himself felt that some of his recommendations were not being acted upon. So it wasn't just Conte's opinion, but he could have handled it differently, let's say, and other people would have handled it differently. We know that's not his style. But I do also think that he has a point. And the interesting thing is, as well, is they had to do something at centre forward, because he had sort of managed this Diego Costa situation, whether you think he managed it well or badly, he did well to actually get Costa through the season to win the league. And then what happened afterwards didn't help anybody. But it's fairly clear, speaking to Conte, that he never really felt that Morata was the answer, and that probably wasn't his pick. And he had created, he felt, a system to work with David Luiz, which did. But he was losing John Terry, who hadn't played a lot. But if you talk to Conte about how big an influence John Terry as a character was within that squad, he gives him as much credit for winning that title as Eden Hazard, as anybody. He said he couldn't have won that title without Terry in that dressing room, because Terry set standards, whether he was playing or not playing. And he felt Van Dijk was the character and the leadership person to almost take over from Terry off the pitch, let alone on the pitch. And he felt that he didn't really have anything to lean on in the dressing room with him, which he'd lost. People can agree or disagree, absolutely fine. I just think it's very, very interesting. And Chelsea haven't won a domestic cup since Conte left. You know, he won his FA Cup in his second season at Chelsea. If you'd have said to me after winning the title that Chelsea will win one more domestic cup and it'll be the FA Cup, and they won't win another domestic cup coming into 2024, I probably wouldn't have believed you, quite honestly, where they were then.
Well, you're quite the maker of segues here, because we're going to pivot from that, which is an excellent piece, and you should definitely go read it if you are listening to this podcast, and look at Chelsea's upcoming run of fixtures, because, of course, our next opportunity to win a domestic cup is in roughly 11 days. And, of course, when you look at, where Chelsea are on the table, sit 10th, plus 1 goal differential, 34 points, within spitting distance of Newcastle in 7th. Probably a stretch to catch United on 41 points in 6th, but who knows? Crazier stuff has happened. Chelsea's January, February was a bit of a mixed bag, right? Some good stuff in there, some very bad stuff in there. We kind of talked about what it would mean to win anything at the start of the year, but now you have something that is a firm target on the 25th for Chelsea to try and win the League Cup against Liverpool, having just been battered by them a few weeks before. Let's talk about that game, because let's play both scenarios out, Matt. They win it or they lose it.
Well, they win it, and if they win it, whatever happens afterwards, I think it represents a decent first season for Pochettino. I wrote articles on it. You can find them. I said if they can win a trophy and finish in any European competition from where they've come from after last season, even with the mixed bag that we've been through, like you say, even with the downs and the bad times, it will represent a decent season. Not many clubs these days win trophies outside Manchester City and Liverpool, let's face it. Arteta's only won an FA Cup, and they've thrown millions at it. So if they win a trophy and they get into any European competition, I will stand by the fact that whatever happens, it will have been a decent season. Some people will disagree with me. I also think the reason for hope going into that final is that this young Chelsea side, who are clearly very talented, but you can't rely on them for consistency, works in the cup. They're a good cup team. They've proved themselves so far to be a good cup team. They seem to be able to lift themselves for a one-off cup match where you don't need consistency and where they're playing for something tangible in that one game. That would be my hope for them. I don't think the Liverpool game in the league will bear too much weight on what happens in the final. And I think the final will be tight. I think Chelsea will give them a game. Now, anyone looking at it rationally would have to say Liverpool are the favourites. But I don't look at that game and think Chelsea have got no chance. And I do think they're a very capable cup team they're proving to be.
Let's say they lose it 4-1 again.
It's meant to be me who's a prophet of
no.
doom. If they lose it 4-1,
I'm just painting both sides of the picture here. Like what happens in a Well,
if they let's say rather than 4-1, let's just say they lose it badly.
Yeah, they don't play very well,
or by 2 goals or whatever. Let's say they lose it by not really being in it. That there's no big battle; they just get beaten on the day. Then the remaining will be on March, April, May. 3 months of the season become really big for Pochettino, because then I think he will have to find a way of qualifying for Europe, be it through the FA Cup or be it through a late run in the league, to be sure of keeping his job. I'm not saying he will definitely lose. I want it very much out there that I'm no way saying he definitely loses his job if they don't qualify for Europe. But to be absolutely sure of starting next season as manager, if they don't win the Carabao, he needs to find a way of qualifying for Europe or missing out kind of heroically, as it were. So if they lose the Carabao without really being in it at all, it becomes a very, very big 3 months for Pochettino. Short answer.
Before that, Chelsea just have the small task of going to the Etihad this weekend and playing Man City, who look like they are going to win the league again, frankly. If Chelsea are able to scramble a draw out of that game, which is not likely, let me just be very clear about that. What sort of momentum do you think that would give them heading into this cup final? Because I admit, I look at City right now and I'm like, I just don't understand how they're not going to win everything again.
Well, and you've got the beautiful scenario of Haaland and De Bruyne just coming into peak fitness just around this time.
Tremendous.
Come back. So
very excited about that. Yeah.
Cole Palmer will have a point to prove. Raheem Sterling will have a point to prove. City aren't keeping clean sheet after clean sheet, so there's an opportunity there. I'm with you. I struggle to see a scenario where they get it a lot. But look, I think Chelsea have just got to... I'd imagine a lot of conversations before and after that game have got to be that the two City and Liverpool games are not linked to each other. If they take a beating at City, they've got to somehow separate that from the build-up to Wembley. They can't let it influence their build-up to Wembley. They've got to go into that City game trying to find positives. Look, we'd have probably felt the same way about City coming to Stamford Bridge in November. It was a 4-4 draw. It was probably one of the most positive moments of the season so far. Raheem Sterling played the game of his life for Chelsea. We all thought things were turning in a good direction. They showed a great team spirit. They are capable of in one-off matches, and they have saved... I know they got battered by Liverpool the other week, but they've also saved some of their better performances for the what you would call tougher games. So that's what they'll be hoping for. They've got a problem at centre-back, though, with the injuries, and you do fear for them. But they've almost just got to go there shot to nothing and not let it affect anything to do with Wembley.
Yeah, I'm curious to see the lineup on Saturday, whether they're going to maybe rest some players ahead of the cup final and throw out something a little less desirable just to make sure everyone's healthy. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, you can argue it both ways, can't you, with that? You can really argue it both ways. I predict Raheem Sterling will start at City, given his performance against them in November, and he will definitely be playing for a place at Wembley. I think he will start versus City, and he will have to play well, otherwise his Wembley place will be in jeopardy.
Yeah, I think he is now second string left back behind Nico Jackson, which is really interesting. A couple of lightning round questions here, and just note that our community was desperate to hear a full match review from the Villa match a couple of weeks ago. I am not going to put you through that torture. I am a nicer person than that. Just note, though, that there were 37 questions about how that match went for you. And again,
do you know where I watched it? I watched it in a restaurant in Turin on Antonio Conte's phone. And at halftime, I made him switch the phone off.
Oh, man, that's tough. Good anecdote, though. Why not? Last question for you. There's this rumor going around that Bayern tried to come in from Mudryk during the January transfer window, and Chelsea said no. Did you hear anything about that? I found it to be such an odd rumor.
I did not hear anything about that. I have my own opinions of that, which I don't want to land myself in any legal problems over. So I would rather leave it at that.
Fair enough. And I guess maybe another quick one. Any info on the Jordan Brand partnership? Are you hearing any cool things about the potential for that?
Do you know what? I saw that on, when was that floating around on social media? I've heard nothing about it. I'll be honest with you. I've heard zero about it. But obviously, Chelsea are Nike. The Jordan brand is now not going to be with PSG anymore. And you can see it would appeal to the ownership because of what they like and where they are. So it makes a lot of sense to me. It does make a lot of sense. But I haven't heard anything on it, no. And if they are going to do it, I imagine they will be doing it extremely, or trying to do it extremely secretively. But it makes a lot of sense, and it would be very interesting.
Okay. All right, Matt. Appreciate it. We're ending this early because I have to run to work, not you. But really appreciate your time, of course. And we will be back multiple times to the end of the season to catch up on any and all things, and hopefully do some more fun mailbagging type of stuff.
Love it, as long as it's not Villa losing.
Can't promise anything. But look, until next time, Chelsea fans, go follow Matt. Go follow us on social, and you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.